An 85-year-old black veteran, a loyal dog, and a quiet town that forgot its promises. But when an unmarked SUV starts following them on their daily walk, a silent showdown begins. What they uncover shakes the whole community. Stay until the end, because this isn't just about who was watching. It's about who finally decided to see. Dear viewer, what you are about to witness is not just a story. It is a powerful testament to the quiet power and pursuit of justice in places most people ignore. If this is your first time here, I warmly invite you to share where you are watching in the comments below. And if stories like this move you, challenge you, or make you think, consider subscribing and clicking the bell icon. We share voices that deserve to be heard every day. Thank you for being here. Now, let's get into the story. Gregory Lane was 85 and steady, too steady for a quiet morning in Willowbrook, Colorado. His hands, scarred from decades spent with rail tools, gripped the leash of Carter, his veteran German shepherd, as they left behind the familiar porch of his small craftsman house. The town lay dim in the early dawn pastel skies, reflecting off dew-slick lawns, and Gregory's polished boots tapped rhythmically on the sidewalk like a metronome counting down to something he could almost sense but couldn't yet see. No one had walked this route with him for years. He'd lost his wife 3 springs ago, her laughter still echoing in the hollows of this street. Carter, his wife's final gift, carried her scent in his fur, a living memory of the warmth and kindness she once shared. Now, the dog served a different kind of mission, silent, vigilant, loyal, in a world grown too quick to judge the weathered man and his shadow-dark companion. This morning, the breeze felt sharp, more urgent than usual, stirring wind chimes from front porches and rattling the last honey-gold leaves that clung to the old maples lining Willowbrook's boulevard. Gregory's heart pulsed with a familiar blend of calm and unease. He was safe here, or at least he'd believe so. They turned the corner by Elm and Main Street, passing the brick facade of Wills & Sons Bakery, where the heavy aroma of cinnamon and fresh bread often found him before he walked inside. Today, the door was shut, the lights off, but he smelled change anyway, something sour in the air. Carter paused, his ears swiveling, as if listening for a note only he could hear. The leash went taut. This was his alert, the unspoken signal that something was coming. A black SUV rolled into view, unmarked windows tinted deep enough that its passengers remained hidden in shadows. It eased forward behind them, engine hum barely perceptible, but insistent, like a pulse raising in proximity, drawing attention. Gregory glanced over his shoulder, but didn't stop. He didn't flinch. Carter responded with a subtle step forward, the leash firm in Gregory's grip. "Just walkin' my dog," Gregory said softly, more to reassure himself than the silent vehicle. He'd served in Korea 40 years earlier, flown missions in a Foxhound jet before becoming a high school history teacher. He taught about wars and rights, about the cost of freedom and the value of standing up to fear. But none of that prepared him for this, a quiet form of intimidation unfolding on familiar pavement. The SUV matched their pace, creeping alongside, then falling back, then creeping again. Each howl of the engine felt like a drumbeat of uncertainty. Willowbrook was quiet, sleepy, yet this intrusion felt deliberate. Gregory's breath stayed steady, his spine straightened. Beaches overhead filtered the sunlight into stripes of shadow and gold, but the light didn't comfort him. It drew attention to the unseen eyes in that SUV. He wondered, had someone called it, in his age his dog? His black face and graying hair, were they enough to set something in motion? They'd lived here nearly 20 years, voted in town, council, volunteered at shelters. He remembered shaking hands, offering a wave, nodding hellos that went unreturned. Not unlike training a jet's engine, this was a test, a powerful interest-gauging reaction measuring him. Carter stopped. Gregory brought him to heel, crouched to whisper, "Ignore it. Do the routine." The dog exhaled, settled his weight. Behind them, the SUV backed off, as if unwilling to break the pattern Grams had followed. But the hush of that moment, when the SUV paused 3 houses back, black windows still tracking, was still a statement. Gregory rose, palm brushing Carter's ear. He'd been trained to fight when challenged. He'd also been trained to walk on. Today, he walked on. They passed by the community garden, early sprouts, reaching through dark soil, each tiny leaf defiant. A cardinal called out across the lawn, its song unafraid of its surroundings. He smiled, tilt of surprise bright in his eyes. Here was proof. Small beauty still thrived, still rose despite pressure. Another block, another shift in the hum of the SUV. It slowed to nearly nothing along Maple, then crossed over to Oak, shadowing them in human form behind dark glass. Wind chimes chimed again. Dogs barked in backyards. Children fumbled breakfast in their kitchens. Yet in that moment, the vehicle loomed large, an ominous blur, on an otherwise ordinary street. He found himself recalling those lessons: stand tall, speak true, he'd once told his history students. When systems test, you answer with clarity, not fear. Greg Lane, war horse teacher, widower, walked with that same steady heartbeat. His cane tapped a single note, "I belong." As they neared the park, at the end of Willowbrook Way, a circle of gravel and maples around a weathered bench. Gregory paused once more and looked over his shoulder. The SUV was gone. No hum, no looming shadow. Just the soft flapping of leaves. Carter wagged his tail. The dog signaled that tension loosened, but Gregory didn't relax. He took a breath, reached inside his coat pocket, and felt the smoothness of a memory, a service medal, a photo of his wife, a small laminated card that read, "I have a heart condition, please call my son." In that moment, he understood they hadn't known which line he would cross: his age, his history, his strength. But they had forced him to draw it anyway. He stepped onto the gravel path leading to the bench and waited. Carter flopped gently to his side, ears alert again, though no threats lingered. In the pastel dawn sunlight, a single phrase pulsed in his mind. "This walk isn't yours alone." Behind Gregory's shadow shifted again, but this time there was no dread in that shift. It was an acknowledgement that someone else was here too. Watching. Maybe waiting for something different to happen. Gregory Lane stood still, and Willowbrook leaned in silently, not sure what would come next, but certain it couldn't be ignored. What happened on that path would ripple far beyond this park bench, and what you are about to witness is more than a confrontation. It is a reckoning between fear and belonging, between routine and resistance, and it starts with a single step, a dog by a man's side, and a community that felt the tremor of their presence. Gregory Lane felt the weight of morning's tension settle deep in his bones as he clipped Carter's collar and leash on the bench. His fingers lingered over the cold metal, tracing the etched name and service number he'd once had engraved on his uniform. Carter sat in silent solidarity, head cocked slightly, eyes steady, as if waiting for instructions more than breakfast or acknowledgement. They had walked this bench before, always after dawn, sometimes before the world fully stirred. But today, After the SUV's shadow vanished, without a word or warning, the bench felt transformed a stage for unspoken conflict. Carter's ears flickered, absorbing every distant bark, every rustle of leaves. He wasn't just a companion. He was a sentinel Gregory had trained long ago. Both of them, man and dog, understood what it meant to hold their ground. A soft crunch of gravel behind them announced the next movement. Gregory turned his head, slowly, meeting the calm, watchful gaze of Officer Maria Delgado. She stepped off the sidewalk, deliberately uniformed, crisp badge, polished, yet her presence carried no accusation, only cautious acknowledgement. Carter remained seated, collar taut, but silent as if sizing her up. Terrific morning for a walk, Delgado said, voice low, but not hostile. Her tone suggested questioning, not confrontation. Gregory nodded politely. Early light suits the soul. She paused, glancing at Carter. That's an impressive dog you have. Name's well earned. He reached down to pat Carter's head. He is steady, sees more than he barks. Carter's gaze lifted, locking with Officer Delgado's. Her face softened, respect, surprise, maybe relief. She looked past them at the bench at the path stretching out behind, then turned her attention back to Gregory. I've been looking for you. He raised a brow, leaning back slightly on the bench. Thought we came early enough to avoid attention. She shrugged, voice tinged with sincerity. That was my point. I saw the SUV earlier, circling you two. I want to apologize. That shouldn't happen here. Gregory straightened guard, rising instantly. Seeing me walk? My dog is not a crime. Delgado nodded, met his calm. No, sir, it isn't. But I should have asked, not assumed. She dipped her head toward Carter. He's a service dog, I take it. Gregory allowed a moment before responding softly, K9 companion. Not officially recognized, but he's earned his stripes. They shared a note of understanding. A soldier's nod passed down through years of recognition. The collared dog between them seemed to bridge skepticism and reassurance. Officer Delgado glanced beyond the swaying leaves toward Willowbrook streets. Look, there's no excuse. That vehicle, it shouldn't have been trailing you. No excuse necessary, Gregory replied. Yet the words carried an echo of guarded dignity, an immovable quality born of resisting erosion. She shifted her weight. We want to know who sent it. I've got jurisdiction. I will help you. He frowned, unsure. And why would I trust? Because she interrupted quietly. This town needs to know what's happening here. That was true. Gregory thought of Willowbrook's quiet streets, their friendly facades and the subtle undercurrents, peace that allowed space for suspicion, silence that burdened presence. I'm not looking for trouble, he said, but I'm not leaving either. Her eyes softened further. Neither am I. But you may need help, shining a light on the dark corners. He took a slow breath. Something about her sincerity disarmed him, a gentle invitation to step out of the shadows without surrendering his ground. Tell me what you know. Delgado hesitated as if weighing patience. The SUV was unmarked, but registered out of state. I'm running plates now. There have been a few sightings near the high school, the community center. I'm not sure if it's related to you, but it's too many for coincidence. He glanced at Carter, whose ears pricked forward at the siren's faint echo in the distance. The dog's instincts were sharper than any license plate readout. Gregory exhaled, hushed and steady. And what do we confront whoever's inside? I want to avoid confrontation, she said precisely. But I can't sit by while someone tests boundaries. You deserve your path through Willowbrook as much as anyone. He considered her words. The sunlight shifted through the trees, painting her face in streaks of integrity and resolution. After a long pause, he met her eyes. All right then, let's walk. They stood, Gregory, unclipping Carter from the bench and lifting the dog to his side. The three of them, the retired airman, the silent companion, and the officer set off down the gravel path together. Their shadows stretched long and sober in the morning light, walking in tandem toward questions that had no easy answers. Every footfall felt heavier now, charged with scrutiny. Yet Gregory didn't flinch. He walked with deliberate calm, Carter pacing beside him, ears still alert. He noticed the familiar flicker of curtains, the quiet hush of porch greetings, the tilting heads turned toward them as they passed. People didn't know they were being watched, but Willowbrook's eyes had taken a long, slow sip of change. Officer Delgado fell into stride, quiet but present. You comfortable with me walking with you? He looked at her in measured surprise. It's your beat, maybe, she said, gaze wavering over the fields, the benches, the silent squares. But it's your life. She gestured toward Carter. And his. Gregory's shoulders relaxed fractionally. In that moment, the collar around Carter was more than metal. It symbolized command. Command of presence, command of dignity, command over fear. The command that even a canine companion could embody. They reached a wider stretch of grass near the heart of the park. The benches here were sun-worn, the light filtered through oak canopies. The SUV was nowhere in sight, but the hum of possibility lingered like an echo he could almost feel in his fingertips. Delgado stopped beside him, folding her hands behind her back. I've run the plates. The owner's a local investor. Lives halfway across town. But that doesn't mean he pulled the trigger. He could be renting it. Gregory bit his lower lip. So, this is about power. Delgado didn't hesitate. Usually is. He turned his gaze to Carter, kneeling to scratch his ears. He never asked for permission. She nodded. You shouldn't have to. They stood quietly. The wind teased the tall grass. Carter pressed his body closer to Gregory lean and assured a soft reminder that they weren't alone. Officer Delgado broke the silence. I'll be back. With evidence. Gregory looked at her, studied the lines in her face. She, like him, had seen what people said and what they meant. She had heard the SUV's engine, even if it wasn't his. Thank you. Delgado offered a curt nod, turned away, and walked back toward the main trail. Gregory watched her go, then looked down at his companion. Come on, old friend, let's finish our walk. Carter wagged his tail, once settling into the direction, stepping forward. Every stride was deliberate, a silent statement. Dignity matters. A collar can command. A man and his dog can walk with purpose through shadows and still be seen. They returned to the bench where the longer path had begun. Gregory reached out his hand, steady and sovereign, and unclipped Carter's leash. As the dog sat ears alert and watchful, Gregory pressed his palm against Carter's head, his eyes reflecting the sunlit morning. They'd taken command of the moment, and the path through Willowbrook, once quiet and shadowed, now carried the promise that whatever came next, they'd face it together, unyielding, unafraid. Gregory Lane could almost hear the soft hum of the SUV's engine again as he stared at his phone. The ruddy glow of dawn through Willowbrook's oaks faded behind the screen's chill as a video file loaded raw, unfiltered, untamed. It showed Carter and him, walking calm and measured until the SUV rolled in beside them. The door opened, lights stayed off, engine barely whispered. Then Carter shifted forward just enough, standing between Gregory and the intrusion. The dog didn't bark. He simply stood guard. No aggression, only presence. That presence spoke louder than any words. Carter's silent act, caught on camera, unmasked the tension. It was as if Carter had barked back at injustice. Gregory pressed play again. The officers stepped into view, their postures firm, controlled. Carter shifted again. The dog's body didn't quiver. Yet his position sent a message. Invisibility had ended. The video ended, but its echo lingered like a verdict. It was Officer Delgado who first suggested sharing the footage quietly, cautiously, with the chief. Not to shame, but to document. Those moments silent, as they were needed to be seen to shape interpretation. She'd said, "Sometimes truth doesn't sit in testimony. It lives in presence." Gregory paused with his thumb over send. He thought of Willowbrook, the churchyards, the bakery, the neighbors who had looked away until now. He thought of Carter, a sentinel without a gun. He tapped send. The reaction was immediate. Within hours, the video was flagged in department records. Within a day, local media had small wins: retired airman's canine companion diffuses tension, and service dog's presence exposes shadowed behavior. Online people segmented into applause doubt discussion. Some debated Carter's training. Others questioned Gregory's motives. The comments rippled with something deeper, a longing for accountability anchored in dignity. Gregory turned off his phone. He sat back and watched Carter breathe, steady and unbothered. The dog's badge-quiet response had already spoken. Now hearts and minds would echo it or attempt to rewrite it. 1 week later, a meeting convened at the precinct. Officer Delgado Carter led carefully into the room. Muzzle off collar, visible, stood by Gregory's side, delicate and purposeful. And Internal Affairs, Lieutenant Stern, but attentive, flipped through printed frames of the footage. The lieutenant cleared his throat. "We'll begin with protocol," he said softly. Carter's posture is not aggression. Yet his stance altered the encounter. He turned to Delgado. "You initiated contact. What prompted you to sit down and watch with Mr. Lane?" She met his eyes. "Because the video showed me what I couldn't unsee." Carter's calm presence reframed the moment. The posture, the pause, those were my cues. The lieutenant nodded. "So you interviewed witnesses?" "Yes." The woman who waved from her porch, the bakery patron who said something unsettling. "He's letting the dog guard him." They confirmed they felt something shift when Carter stepped forward. Gregory gently patted Carter's head. He didn't act. He stood, and holding still, forced the turning point. They played the video again in the meeting room, this time in slow motion. The SUV arriving. The officers emerging. Carter stepping. Gregory's hand on his back. The silence in that sequence resonated deeper than any roar. The lieutenant lowered his pen. "This video isn't evidence of wrongdoing exactly," he said, "but it's evidence of context. It changed the narrative. You, Gregory and Carter, you invited us to see." Outside, Delgado paused as they walked back to the station entrance. Sunrise had arrived, now warm, not golden. She placed her hand gently on Gregory's shoulder. "You turned presence into protocol." Gregory nodded. "That's all any of us can ask for dignity to be more than nameplate promise." From that day, Willowbrook began shifting. The SUV stopped appearing by the paths. The neighbors no longer inclined their heads, nor settled back behind curtains when he and Carter passed. At the post office, Gregory received a nod. At the bakery, banter returned, less floored than before, but genuine. The world wasn't rewritten overnight. But the fissure had opened. Carter remained Gregory's shadow, loyal, disciplined, unspeaking. He didn't need to bark. The world responded to that quiet stance. Weeks later, Delgado brought news. Internal Affairs will recommend a revised code reviewing any contact between unmarked vehicles and civilians. She smiled softly. They want the Carter standard. She paused, and they credited the video. Gregory looked at his dog. He's just doing his job. Delgado grinned. But his job is inspiring theirs. The conversation drifted into comfortable quiet as they exited the station. Carter padded between them, graceful, subtle. The collar glinted in the afternoon light. Then a neighbor waved. Gregory nodded back. Carter's tail gave a soft wag. The man's face softened. Community resumed its shape. Gregory watched the scene unfold and touched Carter's collar. They had submitted the video, but the dog had already barked back. Silence shattered. Reconciliation began in the ripple. A collar can command. A photograph can ignite. A silent bark can still resonate louder than 1,000 alarms. And Willowbrook listened. The sun was high and burning as Gregory stepped in front of the courthouse steps, Carter standing loyally at his side, calm and alert, an emblem of dignity that had begun with a single dogged stance on a quiet path. Behind him, a sea of faces swelled. Neighbors, veterans, young activists, and bakers all gathered around protest signs reading, "Respect every step, and unmarked doesn't mean unchecked." The protest had been planned just hours ago, but heard across Willowbrook like thunder rising from the ground. There was no anger in their voices, only clarity, a collective demand that presence carry weight, and that silence no longer shield unmarked assumptions. Gregory took a breath, steadying himself. He thought of Carter's unwavering posture in the video, how one silent step altered a moment of intimidation. He thought of all who had walked behind him that morning and those who would walk tomorrow. "Thank you." He began, voice calm but resonant. "We stand here because dignity is not optional. It is not something to earn. It is something we carry with every stride, every breath, and every step, whether recognized or dismissed." Carter's eyes met his alert. The crowd quieted, listening. Then came the reporters. Cameras whirred and mics extended. The alleys behind the courthouse filled with movement, local news, national outlets, social media live feeds. Gregory adjusted Carter's collar with a gentle hand. "We're here to ask for accountability," he said plainly. "We're here to remind the world that unmarked does not make us invisible, that presence carries impact, and that one act of agency, in this case by my companion, has to be more than a fleeting image. It has to be a promise." Questions came fast, some soft, some pointed. They asked about the protest's tone. He answered, peaceful and purposeful. They asked about Willowbrook's culture. He replied, "This town is part of me, and I am not ashamed to ask of it the kindness it gives strangers." They asked about Carter's future. He said he will continue working quietly, ensuring that presence becomes protocol. Each answer carried the same measured conviction. Meanwhile, behind him, Officer Delgado approached the steps flanked by precinct leadership. Her email request for a revised standard, the Carter Standard, had been accepted within hours, and now she stood in uniform among protesters, affirming that accountability had traveled beyond glass screens into real policy. "Good to see you here," Gregory said quietly when she reached him. She offered a steady nod. "I promised we'd bring change. Today, we begin." With a gesture, the local sergeant stepped up to the podium, next emphasizing how this was not about an individual fault line, but about procedure and trust. We are adopting new guidelines. Effective immediately, he stated. Any unmarked vehicle approaching a pedestrian in a residential or park area will require registration and rationale, and all such interactions will be logged. We will also begin community outreach days to meet neighbors outside uniforms and cars. The crowd erupted into applause, not for performative effect, but because they saw something shift. Willowbrook was speaking up. Willowbrook was listening. After the official statements ended, Gregory answered door-to-door invitations. At the park's coffee stand, where Marcus had once come forward in support, the barista handed him a free latte for the man who stood tall. Elsewhere, another neighbor offered him a homemade brownie. Children waved at Carter, who accepted treats politely before settling quietly back into his role. Late in the afternoon, a press conference was scheduled in the old town hall. Reporters filled every crevice. Phone cameras rose like vines reaching for light. Gregory took his place behind a lectern Carter seated beside him. He began with softness. Carter does not bark. He observes. He protects. And today, he reminds us that protection need not be loud to be real. His words settled the room. He spoke of the protest, the policy change, but also the long journey to this moment. For me, there was no hatred in that unmarked SUV, no malice, just presence misused. But today, that presence is repurposed. We command, not with fear, but with integrity. We command, not with force, but with compassion. Questions echoed. Would Carter's example be replicated nationwide? Gregory nodded. We've already heard from other precincts requesting more transparency. It's not just about Willowbrook anymore. It's about setting a standard of respect. Carter sat at his feet, still as ever, even under the press of camera lights. That evening, Gregory's phone buzzed. A message from Officer Delgado. The first rollout meeting is Monday. Couldn't have done this without you and Carter. He typed back a simple, here. Carter looked up at him, tongue lolling in a faint doggy smile. Gregory knelt next to him. Together, they had walked protest lines and stood behind microphones. Their journey had begun with a step and grown into policy protest and purpose. And though the crowds would thin and headlines fade, the standard had been set a collar, and a command could still shift structures. Presence mattered. Silence ended. Justice began to unfold one quiet step at a time. Gregory rose early, the dawn light spilling softly through his living room windows. Carter stirred at his feet, tail thumping against the hardwood, an unconscious drum marking purpose. Today was not just any morning. It was the day they would walk the path once more, a full circle from first confrontation to lasting change. They stepped outside the neighborhood, still in dawn's hush. Each familiar sidewalk tile carried echoes of their journey the moment Carter stepped forward under pressure, the video that sparked policy talks, the protest that recalibrated local procedures, and now this peaceful return. The air tasted different, lighter, steadier, woven with intention. As they walked toward the town's memorial grove, Carter stayed close leash, loose but secure, a silent testament to their bond and shared mission. Passing by neighbors' homes, greetings came more frequently now, with snippets of thanks that felt genuine. A path once uneasy had become lined with trust. When they reached the grove, a semicircle of mature oaks around a simple stone monument. Gregory paused. Carter looked up at him, head tilted slightly, as if sensing the weight of the moment. He untangled the leash and set it aside. Here, no verse was needed. Their presence was the message. With slow movement, Gregory knelt beside Carter, fingertips brushing his fur. "You built a legacy," he whispered, not through noise, but through quiet command. Carter leaned in, nuzzling his hand, a gesture of gratitude and partnership. They stood to survey the grove. Beneath the canopy, sunlight danced in mottled patterns, and the breeze carried birdsong. Residents had conscripted the space for remembrance and reflection. It felt fitting that this was their fulcrum. A family with young children walked by children, pausing to wave at Carter, their teacher mother, whispering history. "That's the dog whose dignity reshaped our rules." A local reporter appeared, notebook in hand, capturing the scene in words more tender than headlines. Gregory spoke as he had learned without flourish. Carter reminds us that each step is a chance to stand to be seen and to change what patience cannot. Later, as they returned home, Carter led the way, leash held gently. They paused at Gregory's door. Carter glanced up as if saying goodbye to a chapter. Gregory crouched, giving one final pat. "Keep walking, my friend." Carter wagged once, then trotted inside, settling by the front window, vigilant, peaceful. Gregory stepped in behind him, closing the door. The rhythm of their journey, step by step, day by day, had become a legacy on a leash, an unspoken reminder that dignity is defended not with conflict, but with steady presence. Carter's quiet strength became the soil in which new change would grow, rooted in compassion, watered by unwavering resolve. In the coming days, the Carter Standard would ripple outward, new precinct meetings, public forums, mentorship workshops. But today belonged to this stillness, the soft click of the front door, the gentle exhale of a mission carried close, a legacy carried easy, like a leash in hand, steady as conviction. In the quiet footprints left behind by Gregory and Carter, we find more than just a story of confrontation and resolution. We find a testament to how dignity, even when tested, can redefine the landscape of a community. What began as a routine walk in Willowbrook Park with an old man and his loyal companion evolved into a spark that illuminated the shadows cast by prejudice. The silence that initially surrounded Gregory's humiliation was eventually replaced by voices that demanded change, and it all started with a dog's bark and a camera's lens. Throughout their journey, Carter wasn't just a pet. He was a witness, a symbol of loyalty, and ultimately a partner in transformation. Gregory, a retired postal worker whose life had been marked by quiet resilience, never sought attention. Yet, when injustice pushed into his path, his dignity and the calm resolve in Carter's eyes became the anchors for something larger than themselves. The viral video was never the end goal, it was a mirror. It forced the town to look at itself, to question its reflexes, and to confront what it allowed to exist in silence. As rallies grew and policy meetings filled, it became clear that this was not about punishing one individual. It was about changing the reflex of a community to see beyond assumptions, to pause before reacting, to question the biases carried in unexamined glances. What Willowbrook learned, many others are still learning, that justice is not just about law. It's about behavior, about culture, and about the small, everyday interactions that shape how safe and seen we feel in public spaces. So what is the lesson we take from Gregory and Carter? That courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks on four legs beside you. Sometimes it holds the leash steady while the world around you falters. And sometimes it speaks not through argument, but through presence, through the act of showing up again and again with grace, even when the world hasn't earned it. We are reminded that change does not require perfection. It requires attention. It requires willingness. And it starts with the smallest gesture, a man refusing to step aside when told he didn't belong, a dog refusing to retreat when his human was threatened. These moments build movements, and those movements build a future. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of the strength and quiet dignity or the power of loyalty, consider becoming part of this ongoing dialogue. Share this video. Start a conversation. Be the one who speaks when silence feels easiest. And most importantly, if you want to continue hearing stories that matter, stories that challenge, uplift, and reflect the complexities of our shared humanity, please subscribe to this channel and hit the bell icon. Your support gives voice to those often overlooked and gives us the strength to keep telling these powerful, necessary stories. Thank you for walking this path with us. Let's keep moving forward, step by steady, purposeful step.